I just wanted to start by introducing myself and the student mentorship team that's here with me today. So my name is Emily. Right now I'm in my fourth year of health sciences at the University of Ottawa, and I participated in the OSIC competition in grade 12. It was a really awesome experience, and so I'm really excited for all of you today.
Hi guys, my name is Sophie. I'm in the PharmD program or pharmacy program at the University of Ottawa, and I also participated in this competition in grade 12 and loved it. So I hope you guys all enjoy your experience as well.
Hey everyone, my name is Seb. I'm a second year biomedical science student, also at U Ottawa. I did the competition 2 years ago and I really liked it, so I joined the student mentorship team. So I hope that I'm able to be helpful to you guys this year when you do the competition. So I think we'll get underway now. So just so everyone is aware, this first session is just a general overview of the format of the competition, and what you can expect in the first part of it. And then we'll be doing a second session in about a week or so, more specific to the case study. So about this competition, if this is your second year here, you probably already know all of this. But if this is your first year, this is a two-round competition. So the first round is what you'll start on November 1st. It's a written proposal. So you'll have just over a month from November 1st to December 10th to work on it. It'll be judged by researchers and graduate students, and the top proposals will be invited to the final competition in about February, I think. The actual amount of proposals that get accepted depends on the year. So yeah, we'll be sure to update you guys about that. The second round is a poster presentation. Last year we brought it back in person after a few years online due to COVID. So we're very happy to be able to do that in person again. And the top three posters will be awarded a scholarship for the Faculty of Science. And again, you'll be judged by researchers and graduate students, and you'll have a chance to speak to them, and also hear from some of our guest speakers that we'll be inviting.
I'm so sorry, I completely forgot to mention this as well. But if you have questions, please save them for the end because we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And also, if you're more comfortable in French, everyone on this team is bilingual, so feel free to ask your questions in French at the end. This session will be mainly in English, but again, we're all bilingual. Donc, si vous êtes francophone, n'hésitez pas à demander vos questions en français à la fin de cette présentation, et nous serons heureux de répondre à vos questions. And I'll let you continue.
So, as I mentioned, the people who will be judging your proposal and also your poster in the second round will be professors and graduate students from both Let's Talk Science and U Ottawa. And each submission is judged by 3 or 4 judges, and the scores will be standardized. There is a breakdown of how the scores are processed in the student guide once you get that on November 1st. So here's the timeline for this year. So again, November 1st is when the case competition will be revealed. So again, if you did this competition last year, it is a bit different for this year. The case competition obviously is revealed in about a week or so. So today is just really the format and what to expect for each different section of the proposal. So in terms of what you can write your proposal on, it's really any angle, any perspective of the case topic. So you can look at it from a molecular lens, cellular, physiological, and you can comment on different aspects of it too. So a lot of people, they take it as, how can we cure a specific disease? But it doesn't have to be curing a disease. It can be how can we more reliably detect a disease? How can we identify it better? Things like that. You can use pretty much any knowledge available to you from any and all fields of science. And you will also, on November 1st, get a case story, which is kind of just like a fictional story to inspire you, gives you some ideas. You don't need to take necessarily that story. You have free range on anything included in the topic. one extra restriction is that it must be lab-based, so you're not allowed to do a clinical or an observational study. So in terms of finding a research topic, we recommend that you start broad and work your way down. So you'll get the case topic, and then you can start doing reading in media and journals, find scientific articles that interest you, and try to narrow down what you're trying to focus on. So it's important to look at what current scientists are looking at, what they're trying to solve, the types of things they've been identifying, to generate a idea that's relevant, but also new, something that hasn't been explored yet. So we'll go in more into depth about how you can find a specific topic in the later session. But once the case study is released, if you want, you can already start looking at what you want your idea to be for your proposal. So the challenge is not only generating your own idea, but also organizing it in a format that's very similar to a scientific article. If you have already read articles, or as you will read them, you'll find that the structure of the proposal is very similar. So we have all these different sections. So now we're going to do sort of a breakdown of each section and what you're expected to put in each one. So every good paper starts with a good abstract. So this is a short summary of everything that's going to go on in your proposal. So once I've read your abstract, I should be able to not only know generally what will be happening in all the proposal, but I should also be interested. You should have an interesting kind of catch with your idea. So it's important to be clear but concise in the abstract, because you only have a 250 word limit for the abstract itself. So it's important to be more broad and not really be specific on certain details. Background information is where you'll cover all of the theory that's relevant to your experiment. So you'll start with the problem you chose and its impact, and then you'll follow that by describing your problem. So what specifically does it entail? If you're looking at a specific disease, what is that disease? How does it appear in the body? And then you'll go over some of the research that you've been doing yourself with media or scientific articles, and you'll provide the details and the theory behind what you're looking at. So what are the explanations for that disease? How does it work? And then you'll start connecting ideas. So you'll start putting all the research you've done, you'll start putting together, making links, and then leading up to your idea. So what specific theory goes around your idea? And then you'll give a hint to your idea. So you won't give exactly the solution that you're looking for, but you'll say, having done all this research, having read through all of this theory, here's sort of the type of thing that we're going to explore. And then you'll get further into depth with that with your research idea, which is the next section. Yeah, so this comes straight from the rubric, which you'll get in your student guide next week. So yeah, we just want to make sure that you have all the theory behind your thought process and that it's relevant to your research idea. So the research idea is what you're investigating itself, or theoretically investigating, because you're not actually doing the experiment, it's a proposal. So you want to be creative, you want to have something that's novel that hasn't already been done. For example, we shouldn't be able to find an article that has the exact same idea as your proposal. It should be something new. That being said, it's important to have a specific idea. For example, if you're looking at autoimmune diseases, you don't want to look at every single category of antibodies. You want to do research, and based on your research, you'll see, like, for example, there's 3 categories of antibodies that are specific to our idea. So it's important to be specific and not be too broad and try to overreach with your scope. So the research idea itself consists of the hypothesis, the rationale, and the significance. So now we'll break down all 3 of those. So just as an example, let's say the light in my bedroom goes out and I want to find out why that is. The first thing I might do is generate explanations. So that's your hypothesis. So either my light went out because the light bulb burnt out, or the light went out because the power went off to my house. So that's your hypothesis. It's a causal explanation. So the cause of the problem. So following that, you'll generate an experiment to test that hypothesis. So you'll say, let's say my hypothesis is the light is burnt out. So my experiment will be to replace the bulb. And my prediction is if my hypothesis is right and I do the experiment, what will happen? So if my hypothesis that the light bulb is burnt out is correct, and I replace the bulb, my prediction is that the light will work. So you can go through all those for the three examples if you want to. But pretty much, as I said, hypothesis is a causal explanation for the pattern or the observation that you'll pick out from your research. It must be testable, falsifiable, and addressable via an experience. So like with the light bulb experiment, it's testable because I can test out the different light bulbs. It's falsifiable because if I swap out the light bulbs and it doesn't fix the problem, obviously it's proven wrong. And obviously you have to have an experiment to test it. So the rationale is how you justify your hypothesis based on the research you've done and that you've laid out in your background information. So you present your hypothesis and then you have the rationale. And then the third part is the significance. So it's what impact is your proposal going to have? It's important to be realistic. You don't want to say, for example, if you're looking at infertility, that your proposal will solve every single case of infertility. Obviously, that's overreaching, but you might say our discoveries might be able to allow researchers to create a drug to treat certain types of infertility. Broadly, we just want you to think about what could be done with the information that your proposal would provide.
Thank you, Seb. So as of now, we've done all the buildup, but this is the biggest chunk and I would say the most important part of your research proposal, which is the methodology. So your methodology is the framework for your research or idea. So the practical aspect, you have taken all this theory, you have come up with a hypothesis. How are we going to test it? So this is the testable portion of your proposal. It is composed of sequential steps, and it's in an orderly and logical manner. And as I said, it tests your hypothesis with scientific techniques. And we'll get into different techniques that you can use in your methodology. As Seb said, you can only do it in a lab setting. So it can't be a clinical study, for example, on humans themselves, and it can't be observational, as in no manipulation. So we'll get into that in the next few slides. So the methodology is not a materials and methods list. I know that in high school, that's what we used to put in our methodology section. It used to be, okay, we did this chemistry lab, we used a beaker, we used a pipette. So that's not what this is, but it's more of a step-by-step on what we actually are going to be doing in the lab. So the experimental details are not needed. For example, if you plan on using a specific drug, you don't need to say the volume of each drug that will be administered. You can if you want, but it's not something that you should put a lot of effort into if you're not too sure, because again, you're high school students, we understand the scope of your knowledge. We're not expecting you to write like a PhD thesis. The variables should be stated. So at the beginning of your methodology, you should state your variables, and there can be independent, dependent variables and a control. So we'll get into that further as well. Pretty much what that means is that whatever you're testing should always be countered with something that is not tested to see the effect of the drug. For example, if you're coming up with a drug to target a specific disease. So in that case, we would have a group that has the drug that the drug is going to be used on versus what we call control group, which is a group that does not have the drug administered, and that way we'll be able to actually compare the effects of the drug on the same population. Again, you need a reasonable sample size. So you can't be doing, for example, we're going to test the drug on one mouse and not one other mouse. In science, that's not very reliable. If, for example, this one mouse has something different than all the other mouses, we are probably going to attribute the drug use to the effect that this mouse had. But again, we'll get into it later. The important thing is to have a reasonable sample size. And if you don't have an idea of what a reasonable sample size is, you can always go ahead and look at other research proposals that exist on the web to be able to determine what a reasonable sample size would be for your type of experiment. Another thing to include is lab safety. In every single research proposal, there is always a section on lab safety. It's obviously very important. We need to be in safety to do our lab, or else it's not going to happen. Next thing is the methodology going to be in vitro or in vivo? So if we go to the next slide. So in vitro means that your experiment will be done on cells. So living cells or tissues are categorized as in vitro. It can also be on animals, like regular lab animals, like mice. A lot of people also in practice use zebrafish or other animals. It's up to you to do your research and determine what way is most suitable for the methodology that you choose. So for example, if you're trying to see behavioral effects of a drug, you would probably want to use mice versus cells. Here is an example of the methodology on a poster. You guys don't have to worry about this now. You'll be focusing mostly on your written proposal, but this picture is a good idea of how your methodology should be structured. So in the first section here, number 1, titled Selection Process, the team is describing how they are planning to select their population of study or their population of interest. So you'll see here that they're choosing to work on mice. The second section is preliminary testing. So obviously, like I said, if you have a mouse that has an underlying disease or something different that varies from the population of study that you're trying to look into, it's important to do these preliminary tests to make sure that you have an even and homogeneous population that you're going to be studying. The third thing is baseline metal testing. So here they're kind of looking into their control group and seeing what the baseline of the specific thing that they're studying is so that they have something to compare it to. It's always important to have something to compare your research to, or else it's pretty much a void. Just because something happened in this group with this drug, you have nothing to compare it to, so it's kind of like void. Next thing, they have their infection, and then number 5, their metal research process, and 6, their analysis. So the structure is going to vary based on what you choose to research, but this is a general idea of the structure of your methodology, and soon you will receive with your study, with the whole rubric and everything on November 1st, you'll receive also an example from past years with comments that will let you know, okay, this is how I need to structure my methodology. This is what I found. How can I fit it into this format? Okay, next thing that you'll be submitting with your proposal is a definition sheet. So it's only going to have maximum 10 definitions. And the reason that we require this is because you're going to be looking into your specific area of research that the evaluators might not be particularly familiar with. So if you're going to be using specific acronyms or very, I want to say, fancy scientific terminology, it's important to associate a definition to it so that when the evaluator is reading your proposal, they know what you're talking about and they have a reference to go to if there's a specific scientific term that they're not familiar with. Okay, here we're going to talk about the writing style. When you read other scientific journals or articles, you'll always notice that there's a specific language that they use. So it's not, your research proposal is not going to be written so much in lay terms, but at your level, we're not expecting like something huge, but it's important to stay professional in your research proposal. So avoid unnecessary jargon. And again, the judges are not necessarily experts in your topic. So it's important that whenever you start using an acronym or a term or a process, that you introduce it beforehand or that you include it in your definition sheet. And last thing is to proofread. You can have an amazing research proposal, but if it's filled with grammar mistakes, it's going to diminish the value of your proposal. So it's very important to proofread. You can always use tools like Grammarly or OSIC for those who are writing in French. And you can also always get someone else to proofread it and see, okay, is my research paper understandable to someone who has not been doing research on this for the past month? Okay, so this is a new section that we added, how to read quality publications. So we have a lot of resources at the University of Ottawa, like biblio.uottawa and all these links. You will have this presentation accessible to you. So all these links will be available. We also suggest using PubMed or Web of Science. These are great databases for looking through scientific research that has already been done for you to refer to. For example, you could find let's say a therapy for one specific disease through PubMed, and then decide to apply it to another disease, for example. And yeah, so it's important to use these. You can also use Google Scholar. All these websites will help you get a more in-depth and more medical view of what you're trying to look over, instead of just using Google and having just like regular articles or like newsletters or stuff like that that might not go as in-depth as you want them to in terms of scientific discovery. So we always recommend using PubMed, Web of Science, Google Scholar, and any other similar search engine. Another thing that's accessible to you is that you will be able to use, like I said, the U Ottawa library that is only available to U Ottawa students. So if I'm correct, I think you guys have a maximum of 10 papers, yes. 10 papers that you can get through the U Ottawa library website that one of us on the mentorship team will download for you and send to you. So this is huge because there's a lot of research papers that are not technically available to the public, and you need to go through an institution. So you guys as high schoolers generally wouldn't have the opportunity to see these type of research papers, but through us and through the competition, you'll be able to get up to a maximum of 10 research papers. So if you find a research paper and it's locked, you can send the name of the article or the link to us at the OSIC email, and we will unlock it for you. Next thing, it's important to save all the articles that you use in order to reference them. Referencing is a huge part of science. You always want to give credit where credit is due. If you found specific information from another researcher, it's always important to cite it. And another thing is that you can ask your librarian, or if you know anyone else, for example, your science teachers, if they have useful resources or other databases that you have access to. So if you want more information on that, you could always ask your librarian and see if these resources are available to you. And one more thing I'd like to add is that in the next presentation, I will be showing you a tool called Mendeley that you will be able to use to make your citations for you. So it'll save you a lot of time. I know that's like the most dreaded part of a research project. You're like, oh, I finally finished finding everything and I wrote my paper and now I have to go put in MLA format or APA format or Chicago, and it takes forever and it's dreadful. But in the next presentation, I'll show you how to save. You can do it in like 1 minute. Have all your research proposal, all the proposals that you cited just perfectly formatted for you. So we'll get into that. How to find a relevant research article. So as I mentioned, we can use PubMed, Google Scholar, but another thing that's different with these search engines is that there's specific words like and, or, not, TI, all these fancy acronyms that you can use to help broaden or make your search more concise. So you can see the definition beside or examples beside each one of these commands. And these operators, what we call Boolean operators, will help you with your research. So instead of like looking up something 50 times and you're not getting the results that you want, you can employ these things like and, or not. So if you're looking for something and you keep getting something you don't want, you can write what you want and then not what you don't want. And Google Scholar, PubMed, and most of these search engines will respond to these commands and will help you through looking these things. I know it's a little intimidating. My first time looking in these search engines was like, what is going on? Like, why is it so fancy? Why am I using all of these things? But you'll find that with practice, it gets easier and it gets better. And if you have any questions at all, you can always feel free to email us if it's not going the way you expected it to go. Okay, how to submit an article unlocking request. So as I said, yes, you have 10 papers per team. So you can send an email to osic.uottawa@gmail with the following information: your team code, and the PubMed link of the paper or the Google Scholar link or whatever search engine that you used. And your article will be unlocked within 3 business days. So it's important that if you're doing your research too close to the deadline, that you might not get the articles that you want unlocked. As I said, we will not unlock more than 10 papers per team. And to avoid, reaching your max, you can always look into open access journals. And if you're not sure what an open access journal is, it's a journal or a website or a search engine where everything listed or all the articles listed are free and don't require unlocking. So, but if you can't find it in an open access journal, you have up to 10 papers that can be unlocked for you. Okay, and your bibliography. So as I said, most dreaded part, but we request that you put it in the APA format or the American Psychological Association 7th edition format, and we'll have more information on how to do this format in our next workshop, so don't worry about that now. Okay, and how to submit your proposal. So submissions are due at 11:59 p.m. Please don't submit it past this time, or don't try to submit it too close to the time, because unfortunately we do not accept any proposals that are submitted past this time. So December 10th, 2023, we forgot to change that, but make sure you write that in your calendar and that you maybe try to submit it a day or two before that deadline. And again, you will submit it to osic.uottawa@gmail.com, and only one person per team is to submit it. So if you're doing the competition solo, great, you can submit it. If you're duo or trio, please assign only one person to submit the proposal. And then you will receive a confirmation email of your submission, but within 1 business day, or sometimes it takes us a little longer. If you have not received a confirmation email after 1 business day, please email us again within the same email so that we're sure that we have it and it has been successfully submitted. And again, make sure to include your team code in the email. It's your team identifier, so we know which team is associated with which proposal. Concerning the email content, so like I said, only 1 person per team will send an email, and this is what will be in the email. So the email should contain 2 files in PDF format. Please do not submit any Word or Google Docs, only PDF. And both copies should include a title page. So copy 1 will contain a title page with the school name, team number, team member names, along with your project title. And you should name your file the way it's named here. So your team number _ your project title. So for example, here, E24 was the team number, and the name of the project was Rosh-G lichmitosis. Number 2 will have no identifying information, no names, no school. So it should only contain your team number. So it'll just be your group number. That's it. And the reason that we ask you guys to do this is because when your proposals are being evaluated, they will be evaluated like anonymously. So the evaluator will have no idea who you are, no idea where you're from, no idea what school you're from, no idea what your name is. So we can reduce any bias that will be that could happen during the evaluation. So please make sure to submit both PDF files. If you do not submit both of them, we cannot grade your proposal. Okay, and to contact us, you can send an email to either of these. It's more preferable to send it to the osic.u Ottawa Gmail account because that's the one that the mentors mostly have readily available that we're always checking, but you can also send an email to the osic@URI-RPC. And we also have a Facebook account called URI OSIC if you want to go through that as well. But we prefer emails. Okay, so now what are the next steps? We gave you a rundown of what your proposal is going to be like, the contents of your proposal, but you haven't received your the actual content or all of the documents that will guide you through the steps of it or the topic of this year. So this was really just an introduction to what you're signing yourself up for, which I hope you guys will stay signed up because it's really fun. Yeah, so on November 1st, you will receive the case study. You will receive a recording of today's meeting. So if you feel like we went too fast or you missed something or you just weren't paying attention, don't worry, it's recorded. You will also get a student guide to the case competition. So the student guide will kind of reiterate what we said about each section of your proposal in written words, if that's easier for you than to watch the recording again. And it will also go more in depth than what we did during this presentation. And you will also get a sample proposal. So if you're still a little confused on what exactly you're supposed to be doing, what exactly you're supposed to be writing, we do have a sample proposal written for one of the past topics. And you can also base yourself off of that if you're not too sure what you should be including in each section. And lastly, we will have another workshop, I think on November 4th at 10 a.m. If you want to add that to your calendars, we will also be sending an email, so don't worry. And the workshop will be after you've received the proposal. So we invite you to read the case study and read the topic of this year's competition so that the workshop is going to focus mostly on finding a research idea and reading scientific literature. So once you've read it and you're like, okay, I kind of have an idea of what I want to do, not too sure where I'm supposed to go from here, we'll get into that in the next workshop. Okay, and another thing that we offer is that you can book a meeting with a mentor. So either Emily Seb or I, and you will receive a link to book a meeting with a mentor shortly in your emails after you receive the case study. And you can fill out the Google form request and we will be happy to answer your question in a meeting. So the meeting is max 20 minutes per team and it's the whole team at the same time. So it's important that you coordinate your questions and make sure that it doesn't exceed 20 minutes because past the 20-minute mark, we can no longer answer any questions just so that it's fair for everyone that's competing. And you will be asked to include 3 availabilities so that one of us will be able to pick one of the slots you suggested. The meetings will be held from November 5th to November 30th. And again, there will be a maximum of 1 meeting per team. So please take advantage of these mentor meetings. We're always happy to help if you have any questions about anything at all. You can always book a meeting and we'll be happy to help you out.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sophie. And also, just as a heads up, the max of 20 minutes is to ask questions about the OSIC competition. But if you have any questions just about university life or about careers and the school in general, we're also happy to answer those questions. And those wouldn't count in your 20 minutes. 20 minutes is mainly for competition related questions and information. And so now, before we leave the floor to you to ask your questions, we just wanted to go over a few frequently asked questions. The first one is, if you submit after December 11th, will your submission be accepted? And Sophie already went over this, it will not be accepted, even if it's just a 1 minute pass. So really make sure that if you can submit your proposal on December 10th, 24 hours before, just to make sure that nothing happens last minute and your proposal goes through. Question 2, I'm not sure how to approach this case. Where should I start? And so the best place to start is to look into research articles and reviews from credible sources. And so you can use the search engines that Sophie mentioned, like PubMed, Google Scholar, and any other search engine. And another recommendation is to look for these types of papers called systematic reviews. These papers basically look at all of the literature that's been written on a specific topic, and then they'll resume the most important parts and talk about avenues for future research that are exciting and interesting. And so reading that, especially that last section of these systematic reviews, is a great place to start having ideas of what your research proposal could be. And again, we're going to go over these types of papers in more detail in our next workshop together. Question 3, how do I know whether my research idea is good? There is no right or wrong answer, but make sure that you have a focused research question and that you have clear independent and dependent variables and positive and negative controls. And so a positive, if you're writing a proposal, for example, you're trying to see if the drug is going to have a positive effect on certain mice, your positive control will be another drug that you know has a positive effect in mice. And so another drug that is known to be effective, and you will compare your drug that you're administering to the one that we know already works, versus a negative control is something that you'll either give them nothing, or you're going to give them something that has the opposite effect of the drug that you're administering, so that you can compare the drug that you're testing to something that's known to make it better, something that's known to make it worse, or something that's known to not change the side effects that the mice is feeling. That might have been a little unclear, so if you have questions about it later, please feel free to ask. The other thing is, there is no right or wrong idea, but try to base your research question on previous research and previous studies that have been conducted. Okay, question 4, what constitutes a good methodology? It should be specific, and it should describe how you're going to conduct your study, what data you're going to be collecting, and how you'll be controlling the variables that can affect how credible your findings are. We're going to go over the methodology section again in our next meeting. Again, my best advice is to look at papers that are already published and look at their methodology sections and try to see if you can use that kind of format and use previous methodologies to inform the way that you're going to approach your proposal. Question 5, what do I do if there are no precedents for our experiment? If no one has ever done it before, what do we put in the background or info section? And so for this, what makes you think that your experiment will work? If the research that you've done has led you to the conclusion that your idea will work, that is what you're going to be putting in your background information section. Your experiment or your research project doesn't have to be exactly the same as previous research. You just have to talk about what has been done in the past and what information is currently available that makes you believe that your research idea is going to work. And question 6, how many sources do you need to have? There's no specific number that we're giving you. Try to aim to have sources that are credible and peer-reviewed. So start off by looking at academic journals and going through PubMed or Google Scholar. And then, you can start by looking at general articles, but then dive deeper to look at academic journals and research articles. And so really just cite anything that, any information that you take that's not your own. And so there is no minimum or maximum number for that. How do I go about reading this very long research paper? So there's different sections in a research paper. You'll have the abstract that's going to give you a general idea of what a proposal was on and what their experimentation goals were. And you can see if, based on the abstract, if it aligns with what you are researching. The background information will also give you more information on the field of your topic, which can help to reinforce your understanding, and likely that's information that you can also use in your background section. Obviously, making sure to cite that as you're writing it. You can also take a note of the procedures that they use, like the softwares that they use to analyze data, what materials they used, what methods they used. And keep in mind that you're creating a new proposal. You shouldn't copy a past experiment completely, but you can use things like the methods that they used or some of the information that they learned to inform your proposal. And question 8, what's the difference between an abstract and the research idea or the rationale? So the abstract is basically a summary of your whole project, gives an overview of your proposal, and it will include your research idea as well as the general procedure and the significance of your proposal. And the abstract will have a 250 word count. And then your research idea will go more in depth into your research idea and the rationale. And question 9, do I need to include specific amounts or dosages of certain materials in the protocol? I think Sophie went over this as well. And you don't need to put specific quantities or volumes for the materials. And those are the FAQs that we wanted to go over. Now we'll open the floor to your questions. You can feel free to either write them in the chat. You can also DM them to Sophie, Seb, or I if you feel uncomfortable sending that out to everyone. And otherwise, you can also raise your hand on Zoom and ask your question out loud, and we'll try our best to answer your questions. And so I just have a question here that asks if you registered as a team, but now want to change to solo, if that would be possible and how to go about that. And yes, it would be possible. At that point, definitely speak to your team about it to let them know of the change, and then send us an email at the OSIC email, the email that you received the link to this Zoom call from. Just send us an email saying that your team has changed, and we'll be able to sort that out for you. And a question, would it be possible to email the Google Slides that we went over today? And yes, we'll be emailing that. You'll be receiving the recording from today, as well as some slides and all the other documents on November 1st. And so the next question, are the 20 minutes meetings solely for asking general questions about OSIC, or can our mentor also provide us feedback on the proposal? And so it will be mainly to answer questions. We won't be reading through your proposal and providing feedback, just because that can give an unfair advantage to some teams over others. But if you have questions about specific sections of your proposal and how you should go about formatting those things, those are the kinds of questions that we can answer.
I just want to add on to that we will not be reading any section of your proposal at all. So you can't ask us like, oh, can you read my abstract and tell me if it's good? It needs to be really precise questions. So for example, if you have a question about something that you mentioned in your abstract, or you're not sure if you should include it in your abstract based on your research idea, we can answer those type of questions. And worst case, if you have a question, you can always ask it. And if we're not allowed to answer the question, we'll just let you know.
Also on the topic of feedback, while our team cannot offer feedback, you probably have a large social network, so you can ask your friends, you can ask your teachers to read over your proposal and offer feedback there as well, as long as you're the one who's actually writing the proposal. No one else can write it for you, but you can ask anyone in your social network for feedback. And a question from the chat, would we be able to have access to multiple examples of research proposals? And so in the welcome package that we'll be sending out on November 1st, you'll get that one full document that's a research proposal from previous years. But in the student guide, at the very end, there's a resource section, and we'll include a link there to a website where you can see the posters from the OSIC competition from previous years that made it to the final round. And if you zoom in on those posters, it's very readable, and you can read how previous competitors structured their proposals. And lastly, because the way that you're framing your research proposal is based on how most scientific papers are published in journals, you can read through published articles and kind of use that as a guide to how to structure your own proposal. And then another question, if we have access to a lab, can we conduct the experiment ourselves? Can we use our own lab results as material or articles? And so in the context of this competition, it's purely proposal. We're not expecting you, and we don't want you to actually conduct the experiment and write about your results. In this competition, you're just proposing methods and you're proposing what you think you'll find. If after this competition, you're very eager and you find someone who's willing to let you conduct your research, yes, that's something you can do, but that's going to be outside of the context of this competition.
And I also want to add that this competition kind of mimics real life proposals. So in a real life setting, let's say you're a researcher and you have a lab and you want to do a research, like you want to do research on something, you have to submit a proposal to a board of ethics and multiple other boards for it to be approved before you do it in the lab. So this kind of simulates that as well. You only write a hypothetical proposal. You think, okay, based off of this research, I think that if I do this in the lab, I will expect these results. You submit it to us, the board. We will judge it and we will say, okay, yes, this makes sense. This is ethical. This is doable within the scope of whatever your scope is. And then in real life setting, let's say you're in a lab, you're associated with the University of Ottawa, and then you can do it. So please do not attempt to do anything in your labs at school or labs at home or anything at all. This is purely hypothetical and based off of research only.
To Katrina's question about will the slideshow be emailed to us only in English or in French too, like Seb said, the recording from this presentation and the slides will be in English, but all of the information that's on the slide is also in the student guide. If you registered for the competition in French, you'll be receiving a French version of the student guide with all of this information, but in French. And all of your competition documents will also be in French as well. A question, will presentations in French and English be in the same set? Would you be able to just clarify your question? Are you asking about the presentations that we're giving or the presentations that you'll be conducting?
I meant the when you guys will evaluate the all the presentations, will the presentations be in this English and French will be in the same like podium, or will it be two different things?
That's a great question. So here we're talking about the final presentation day, and so the folks who make it through the first round. In the final round, the French and English will be evaluated in the same pool. On the presentation day, we'll have separate judges who will be evaluating the English contestants versus the French contestants, but everything will be judged in the same pool and it'll be on the same podium.
Okay, thank you.
If you're worried that some French judges or English judges will be less lenient or more lenient, we do have some judges that are bilingual that will evaluate both, and all the test results will be standardized. So what standardized means is that the score will be shifted based on, let's say, like if the judge has been giving only really good or only really bad reviews, it will kind of shift towards the middle.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any other questions? A question, do we have to submit our proposal in both languages? No, you do not. The language that you registered for the competition in is the language that you'll be submitting your proposal in. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or message in the chat. But if you do not have any other questions, oh, sorry, I just received another. So just to clarify, we won't be testing our hypothesis. And that's right. You will not be actually conducting your experiment. You're just going to be proposing an experiment that someone could potentially conduct. And then you'd be proposing what you think your hypothesis is and what you think the results might be if we were to complete this study. And then there's a question on, is there a word limit on our document? Yes, there is. This is going to be clarified in the student guide that you're going to receive. So the abstract section has a word limit of 250 words. The rest of your proposal has a word limit of 1,000 words. This word limit does not include your reference section. It does not include your definition sheet, but everything else will be included.
If we're all done with OSIC related questions, you guys can also ask any questions relating to university or University of Ottawa or programs like biomed, health, biomed, I think, just biomed. We all did biomed and or pharmacy school at the University of Ottawa. If we'll prioritize those questions first, but I know a lot of you guys might be in grade 12 and applying to university. So we're also here if you guys have any questions about that as well.
Just about finding research opportunities or scholarships and whatnot. We'd be happy to answer those questions as well. But if you don't have any questions, thank you so much for joining and feel free to hop off this call. I hope that you have a really great competition and that you're really excited to get started on the case this year. So question, how to go about getting research opportunities in first year for biomed. And so if you're applying to biomed right now, I recommend that you look into this scholarship program called the Undergraduate Research Scholarship, or the URS. That's a really great opportunity where in the summer after high school and also in the summer after your first year, you're basically guaranteed a spot in a research lab with a professor, and you'll also get a certain amount of money to conduct your research as well. And so that's something that I would look into. And then as a first year student, during your classes, if you can participate in class, go to your professor's office hours, which is essentially a time that each professor dedicates each week to answer their students' questions, and ask them about the research that they're doing, read about the research that they're doing and see if that's something you're interested in. And then you can also ask them if they have opportunities in their labs for volunteers or if you're looking for a paid position for paid positions. But really as a first year student, it'll likely be volunteer positions.
And if you guys have any questions about the undergraduate research scholarship, we have a few people on our team, including myself, who have done who have had the experience to do the URS thing. So if you have any questions about that, you could always book a mentor meeting when you have questions about OSIC or your actual proposal. And then at the end, if you specifically have questions about URS, maybe include that in the notes when you're making a submission for a mentor application. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions relating to that. I did my research in cellular and molecular medicine in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Ottawa in the Trinkle Lab, working on fluorescence in cells and the activity of certain proteases in cells. So if you have any questions about that at all, you could always book a meeting for that.
A question, could you compare biomed versus kinesiology? Is one easier than the other or provides a stronger foundation for going to med school? And so that is a tough question. It'll really depend on what your strengths are. Kinesiology is a lot of anatomy and physiology classes. And so it's a lot of memorization-based classes, whereas biomed is a lot of science-based classes, a lot of lab-based courses. And so based on what the kind of courses you excel in are, those will set you up better. I will say that the biomed program will give you all the prerequisites that you need to go to medical school, whereas the kinesiology one will not in the program itself, but you will have electives where you can go and take the credits that you will need as prerequisites to apply to medical school.
One other thing is that if you know which medical schools you are interested in or plan on applying to, you can always look at their websites and see what their prerequisites are and match it to undergraduate programs that you're also interested in. So if you're, let's say you want to apply for U Ottawa Med, you can look at their website, see what their prereqs are, and then compare it to either biomed or kin and see which one is more suitable.
Also, just as a heads up, I'm in health sciences, which is slightly different from biomed. And so Sophie or Seb, I might let you answer the next question on, did you do any extracurriculars to up your applications, as biomed is a competitive field?
Yeah, I answered that a bit in text, but yeah, I just did a lot of volunteering, honestly. Diversifying your volunteering experience is always good too. For example, I did some technology event volunteering, helping out seniors use technology. I did some French tutoring, so helping English-speaking children learn French, and a couple of other things. One of the great ways getting involved with outreach events. For example, I'm not sure if they're still doing anymore, but I know Candlelighters had a annual bike ride that he did to raise funds. So things like that really help put you ahead. So anything really, especially health related, like I said, raising funds, things like that really gets you out there.
Also important to not be too centered on your grades. Like you obviously need good grades, but they're looking for a little more than that. So especially if you also plan on applying to med school, dentistry, pharmacy, any things like that, it's always important to be well-rounded. So obviously do as well as you can in school, but also make sure that you're involved in your community, doing research. This is also a great example. It shows that you're interested in research and in science, and you're taking the time and effort. I know grade 12 is like a busy year, or even grade 11 is a busy year, but you are doing something that you're passionate about, for example, this research competition, and you're getting involved in things. So that's also a step in the right direction.
Yes, Jack, did you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me well? Thanks. So I have two questions actually. So I was wondering, why did you choose health sci over biomedical? And follow up, is there any clinical opportunities in Ottawa as like working in a hospital, doing volunteering in a hospital? I know here in Kingston, we have like Providence Care Hospital where you can do volunteering and you can also work with the patients. Is there that type of opportunities in Ottawa? Thanks.
That is a great question. Just before I get into that, just a heads up, this meeting will crash in 10 minutes. We can stay on this call. If at that point there's still questions, we can just hop back on. To your first question about health science over biomed, that was a personal choice because the health science program is a lot more interdisciplinary. It's an interdisciplinary approach to the healthcare field. And so you learn a lot more about the social determinants of health. So things like how race and education and poverty can affect someone's health. And you also learn about like more of the policy side of health and the epidemiology side of health. And that was something that I was a little more interested in compared to the pure sciences. And so for me, it was a personal preference where that was something that I was looking for. The other nice thing is that you have a lot less labs and a lot more electives in health sciences. And so at least to my strengths, it's an easier program. Obviously, it'll depend on if you excel in science courses or not, or what your preferences are. And so that's the main reason why I chose that. To your second question about clinical opportunities, there are a lot if you look for them. The Ottawa Hospital, and so there's different campuses. They're always looking for volunteers. CHEO, which is the Children's Hospital, they're also they recruit volunteers, but you want to check in regularly because they'll only open their applications for very short periods of time. Within CHEO, something that I'm doing that some of you might be interested in since you're interested in research, there's a program called Support Ambassadors where you volunteer in the emergency department and you look at all the incoming patients to see if any of them are eligible for any of the studies that are being conducted at CHEO. And if they are eligible, then you will go and approach those patients and talk to them a little bit about the studies and see if they're interested in speaking to a research assistant so that they can be enrolled into the study. Other than that, a lot of long-term care homes are also looking for volunteers. So places like the Pearly Health or Claire Hospital, they often look for volunteers. So that's something that I would look into. I don't know if Sophie and Debbie had anything to add on in terms of clinical opportunities.
No, not really. You covered the clinical opportunities really well, and a lot of clinical opportunities are available in Ottawa since we do have a lot of hospitals that specialize in different types of care, like long-term care or children, like CHIO. And in terms of doing it through the university, there are co-op opportunities if you want to work, like actually work, not volunteer, and get paid for and receive credits through the university. So that's always something interesting to look into. But there's also a lot of stuff that you can just apply to just by yourself without going through the university, which it can also be beneficial. And in terms of health science versus biomed, I know I was also stuck in that when I was in grade 12. I personally chose biomed because of all the labs and stuff like that. And I personally loved doing labs. So that's something that I chose to do. And I also found that the prerequisites for other programs like pharmacy were all in the first 2 years of biomedical sciences. So I was able to apply to pharmacy school after my first 2 years, having had all my prerequisites. So that's also something else to look into. If you plan on applying to anything afterwards, it's important to look at like what your goals are, what your timeline is, and see which program favors your goal.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, from what I know, health sciences I think has a lot less chemistry than biomed. And that is important for some med schools. Some that require you to have credits in organic chemistry. And those are a requirement for biomed, but I don't think they are for health sciences. So just something else to keep an eye out on.
On that note, what they're saying is 100% true. It's not directly in the course sequence for health sciences, and so you'll have to take those prerequisites if you need them as electives. It is manageable. I know a lot of folks who apply to med school or to pharmacy after, and you just have to plan a little bit more in advance. And then a question in the chat, what is a good early application average to get into U Ottawa Biomed? Personally, I don't know. I don't know, Sophia said.
Generally I feel like maybe the stats are on the University of Ottawa. Usually for every program, they say like the range of what your grade should be for each program, but I cannot tell you off the top of my head what a good early application average is. It's generally pretty high, but it's pretty, if you put a lot of effort into your schoolwork, and you should be fine.
A question for you, Ottawa Biomed, how relevant are extracurriculars compared to grades? I believe they only consider your grades for biomed.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. When I applied, it was mostly just your grades. Yeah, you just would link your school grades to your on OUAC, and that was pretty much it. Extracurriculars are more relevant for scholarships like URS, undergraduate research scholarships, and any other scholarships that you want to receive or any other research opportunities. But as far as getting into the program, it's mostly just your grades. And then if you plan on getting into, for U Ottawa, there are, as of now, I don't think there are any essays or things like that to write. You just apply through OUAC. I don't want to be quoted on that. I'm not 100% sure, but at least when I applied, biomed was just you added to your list of programs on OUAC for University of Ottawa. I know like other programs, like for example, Health Sci at McMaster, there are more things to do, but it's important to just go through whatever programs you're interested in, and they'll say what you need to do. If it doesn't say you need to do an essay through OUAC, then no essay is required.
If no one has any other questions, um, thank you so much for joining. We have 2 minutes and 30 seconds left for this call. So if you do have another question, just like something quickly in the chat so we know to restart this. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming. It was really lovely talking to all of you, and good luck on the competition. So if you have another question, you'll email the OSIC email, which is the email that you'll have received the Zoom link through. If you don't receive an answer through there, you can also message us on Instagram at the OSIC Instagram account.